And the topic we are going to talk about today is doing coursework as a doctoral student and preparing ourselves as an immersion scholars in the field. So can you tell us about yourself and especially your background, your research interests so far?
Oh, yes. Thanks, Han, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, my background, right? I'm from Brazil. I think that's the first thing to say. And my background is I majored in English literature, in English language and literature. And then I started my career as an English and American literature substitute professor at the University of Brasilia. So I was there for like 2 years. And then after that, I went straight into TESOL and worked like for a decade as an English teacher in a language school in Brasilia. And then I became part of the staff of the Brasilia Federal Institute, which is part of a federal network in Brazil of a educational institution that serves vocational education. So we have vocational high school education and also higher education, but also with this vocational type of perspective. So back home, I work with I was working more with higher education in a TESOL development undergrad course, right? Yeah, so that's my background, and I'm on leave until 2025 so that I can do my PhD, and that's why I'm here at UAlbany.
Wow, what an experience you chose in order to kind of expand on a specific topic, right? Like, what is your research interest right now, Roberto, when you embark on this PhD journey?
Sure, yeah. So my interest, I think it stemmed from my master's. So I did my master's at the institute where I work, right? Because it has higher education. So they had a master's program there, and it was related to vocational education. Back home, the term that we use is technological education, but it's the same as vocational. So So I did a master's in technological education with a focus on TESOL. So I wanted to know how TESOL can be taught in the context in the vocational educational context in Brasilia, right? Or in Brazil, if you want to expand it. But that was my actual context. And there was no methodology, no philosophy, nothing was written about how this could be done, right? How you could align teaching practices with the philosophy behind the Federal Institute and vocational education. So that's the study that I did in my master's. And then what I found out from doing that was that it was very difficult. I mean, technology played a really big role.
Yep.
Right? When you're trying to do this in the 21st century. And that's one of the reasons why I chose to do my PhD in UAlbany, because it was one of the universities that had this very, it had this clear inclination towards technology in education. And that was one of the reasons why I applied to UAlbany. So I think that's what brought me to UAlbany. And my interest is something that also came from my master's research, which is a sort of like a tension that I observed between the acquisition of language, right? Which that's what I'm interested in as a TESOL teacher.
Yeah, you started from there.
Yes,
language.
Exactly. So the acquisition of language, but then there's also the aspect of like language education, as in citizenship education. Which is something which we can't ignore anymore in the 21st century. And when you look at the history of TESOL, there's a lot of focus on the language acquisition, but there isn't a lot of it's new, the focus on language education more broadly, and there are no real frameworks that try to bring these two things together. like within TESOL. So that's that's where my problem lies. And the approach that I decided to take and try to tackle this problem is project-based language learning, because it seems to me that because of its design, it's appropriate to try and juggle these two dimensions, which, according to literature that I've read, is actually creates a certain tension, right? Trying to manage learning goals that relates to both, language acquisition, and learning goals that relate to language education more broadly.
I see. So you also mentioned the technology part. So it means the project based with some element of technological integration, or using technology as a tool in order to operate the project based learning process. Which direction are you taking right now? So the technology can kind of play in those big overarching elements.
Perfect. Yes. So I would say it's more in terms of integration, right? Like there in the literature, you will find also in the literature, we see that project-based language learning has used technology, is always using technology. It's very difficult, I think, in the 21st century for you to totally ignore technology, right? But so there are some scholars who actually want to emphasize this aspect of technology, which is very common. Like, it's so common in project-based language learning that people don't really talk about it because it's already there, right? Just like technology in our lives, right? Like it's everywhere. Like, it's so ubiquitous that sometimes we don't even talk about it because it's a given. So this, of course, I think is the case in project-based language learning. But as I said, there are scholars who want to emphasize this integration aspect, but they don't really use the idea of they don't use the word integration. They prefer to use infusion or enhantion. So they say, technology infused project-based language learning, or technology enhanced project-based language learning. That's what comes up in the literature. But but that's the idea. The idea is of integrating, because you can't really think of 21st century education without technology. Yeah.
Okay, I think a lot of things that help you learn as an emergent scholar, like I say, like, because you are kind of not just reading, but you're reflecting and you critically, think about and process the information that you have received. So I think I will go to the next question that related to how you build up your capability as a critical reader in a doctoral program. So how do the classes in the doctoral coursework help you grow as a scholar and help you to inform your research interests so far? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good question, because when I was I wasn't too sure like that project-based language learning was the best let's say framework to tackle the problem that I mentioned earlier, right? About the tension between, language acquisition and language education and TESOL. But with the readings that I've done through the courses, what they've done is they've given me like greater perspectives. I was able to like get to know fields that I had no idea existed and what they thought. And although it's not directly related to like my topic of project-based language learning, they sort of touch on and they reinforce, concepts and conclusions that I already like had, or which I think are implicit in project-based language learning. So what I'm trying to say is that the coursework and the readings was able to broaden like my knowledge of many adjacent fields, right? But at the same time, they sort of reinforced my position that project-based language learning was actually a good choice. And so I think it reinforced and gave me more confidence that I was going on a path that was that made sense, because I was like more in doubt in the beginning. But like the more I read, even if it's not directly related to my specific topic, it's still like informs and helps me, as you said, like to critically evaluate and contextualize project-based language learning and come to the conclusion that, yeah, it makes sense. It makes sense to go down that path.
Can you give me one example of a field that you don't think that it is it, or you're saying that it's not really directly relate to your specific topic, but it's helpful. Can you give me one specific example of the course you use?
Yes, I can. For example, critical literacies, right? So critical literacies is an example of a topic which, it's not directly related to project-based language learning, but it talks about this tension of, teaching learning goals that have more to do with like critical thinking and multi-literacies, and so it's not directly related, but it sort of reinforces this idea that it's important to it's important to think about these learning goals and not only language acquisition, for example, right? But of course, we as TESOL teachers or teachers of second language or foreign language, we can't really like abandon the idea of language acquisition and language like the acquisition field, right? The field of language acquisition. So I think that's one. And also, for example, courses that in the language courses that I've taken in the department with Dr. Keshkes, for example, which are not directly related to project-based language learning.
Like translanguaging, and you're one of the students that has the most exciting and engaging contribution. Whenever we have discussion in class, that's always very engaging. So yeah, how that class particularly help you to expand on your research interest? Then I'm curious.
Yeah, exactly. So it's actually connected, but I the way that I see it now is that the same tension that I perceive in in language education that I've referred to is also at the core of translanguaging, because we're also trying to
like you mean social justice level and the level of citizenship education, like how can we perceive other people?
Exactly. So that would be, for example, if you think of translanguaging through that lens of social justice or of citizenship, and like that's one type of way of looking at translanguaging. But there's like the translanguaging where you're more focused on the linguistic aspects, right, of acquisition. So that's another aspect, and we're trying to sort of like balance and trying to cater for both. So that's like the same tension that is at the core of what I'm researching. And then I also see that in bilingualism, multilingualism, and in translanguaging, for example. So that's an example of an adjacent field which can help that's what I mean by like sort of reinforces the idea that I'm on the right track in trying to deal with this problem through a project-based language learning lens.
So basically, I think the next question have two parts. So is more focused on how you select your coursework, because it might be very helpful for other doctoral students. So first of all, is there any rationale or any recommendation from even colleague or professor when it comes to which classes that you should take, or is it on your own? And second is that as an international student, some classes you choose may have the context, not really international context, right? Really focus on, US context, US based. So how do you think to what extent you can apply those coursework to your own research, for example, or your application to your own country context, for example?
Yeah, it's a good question. Actually, I of course, I always have my country context in the back of my mind, right? When I do anything, when I'm reading, because that's what we do. We activate the schemata, right? So that's always like there in the back of my mind. Although, as you said, Han, we're reading usually about like the US context, right? And I think that my research is probably going to be done in the US context.
Mm.
So my context back home is going to be always there in the back of my mind, but it's, I think, like at the forefront, we do have the US context, and that's where I think I plan to carry out my research. And also I think because it's I had already, thought about this, like, oh, should I research my own context back home? Should I research the context here? And I thought that, well, the way that I think of it at the moment is that the opportunity to research the context here is the one that I have now. If I don't take it, I'm probably not going to have it again. And researching back home, I can do it later when I go back.
Good approach.
Yeah, so that's how I'm thinking about it right now. But I'm sorry, you there was something else in the question that I think that I missed, that I didn't answer.
It's more like if you could have any tips
Oh,
for
yes.
new doctoral student to choose a course that is beneficial and relevant in the long run, what would the strategy be?
So I think we're always trying to sort of balance between like doing coursework that is going to support what we think is going to support our research, right? Our research interests, our research projects, and coursework that we think that we might enjoy doing. There might be overlap. Hopefully there is overlap between these two, right? You might enjoy doing that which is you're researching, but not always, right? So I think that you should prioritize that which is going to help the research. But I think it is also important to not completely discard choosing courses that, sort of, they serve your curiosity, and your interests. And so I think that's also important. And then in that process,
which course in this program, for example, is serve your curiosity as first more than your research?
So for example, I really enjoy doing the language courses, right? So I think those are, I could say like my favorite course was a course that I did with Dr. Leonard, which I think was language, literacies and culture. I think it was 881, I think. I might be wrong on that, but I think it's 881. So anyway, that one was like, I think the most mind-blowing course in terms of like what we read about. And it was like something completely new, like it changed my way of thinking. So that would be like the number one course that I would recommend for those people who like language, right? Even people who don't like language, but like education, because you can't really separate language from education. So that's the one that I would recommend. But then there's also like the courses given by Dr. Keshkes as well. He's the only other one that I know. I know that there are other teachers like language that give language courses in the department, but I haven't had the opportunity to take them. Right, I've only been here for like 3 semesters, so I've taken 2 with Dr. Keshke. So it's always nice like to do a course which is like specifically related to language, because like one of my passions. And so the other courses never are like specifically related to language. So like that's, I think, my interests lie in that, right? And that's what like I see my specialization as in language and technology. So I'm always looking at language and technology, right? That's how I see myself.
You narrow down the keywords so that you have some sort of direction, and from that direction you can also put in a little bit of your curiosity to take class, just so you know that you're on the right track again, right?
Precisely.
It's becoming making sense to you. So in those classes, what is your favorite instructional activities that really trigger your contribution? Because compared with master level courses, right? Doctoral student, I think, need a little bit of different stimulation. So what are some instructional activity that you enjoy as a doctoral student?
It's a good question. You mean that the professors propose for us, right?
Yeah, and maybe, hopefully, professor will listen to this podcast and say, I like Roberto's idea. I will integrate that to attract more doctoral students.
Well, that's a good question. I think, in a sense, I've been seeing some like parallel between project-based language learning and the type of activities that we do as doctoral students, because although there isn't like this overt adoption of project-based language learning, what we're doing in the end is like we have a project. Each type of course is trying to help the doctoral student use the knowledge from the course to inform his or her own research, right? And so many courses have this structure where like the final project is something which can advance your research, like your research interest, right? And many courses, they're very open, right, to adopting and like they're flexible and they can adapt in a way that the type of coursework that you do is something that informs, right, your own research interests. So I think in that sense, it's I like this strategy, that flexibility where it's as if we are doing a project, right? And I think what I really like is the parts when we get to share, like me and my colleagues, we get to share like our perspectives, when we get to share our projects and our insecurities. So it's great when, for example, we're put together and then we can talk about like, I'm doing this, but I'm having this type of trouble, right? I'm looking at this, I'm researching that, and this is what I see, but I'm not sure. And I think ETAP Docs many times is trying to do that like outside of the course.
Yes.
Because I think that's
still doing that at the research forum. Yes. Exactly.
And I think that's a great way to go about it. And I think it's really related to like project-based. It's like each one of us is doing our own project, right? And the way that like you have these checkpoints and the way that professors' feedback can help us, right? As we go along, as we develop the project. In the end, that's what we're doing, right? We're becoming more critical. We're, we have our hands on. We're doing the actual the work, and hopefully with collaboration from our peers, we get this support. Which, because you've been through this. It's very common for us to feel insecure in what we're doing, right? And at many points. So I think having this feedback and from teachers, but also from colleagues is very, very important. Yeah. So that's what I would say. If I give it more thought, maybe I could come up with some other, instructional.
I think you mentioned a really, really important point for the doctoral level course is that I think the distance between you and the professor is not that far, because you are like we tend to say we are emergent scholar in the field. We're more like a junior researcher. So I think a mutual benefit of learning from the senior researcher and professors, and at the same time learning with other college, are so important. Like it's more a close-knit community of practice, of research practice. So I guess you will enjoy more space for opinion forum, for presentation, but not just only presentation, but more like learning and giving feedback should be the integral part of the activities in a doctoral level class.
Yes.
So I totally think that is a great answer for that. So did it usually, does it usually take you a long time to prepare for a research paper, especially if it is like an empirical final paper that you have to do in some of the methodology class, for example? Do you have any tips in order for doctoral student fresh, first year, in order to deal with those kind of workload?
Yes, that's a great question. It's not something that like I already knew. You sort of I've learned as I've been going along, which is, and I don't say this because like I can do it like perfectly, but it's something like that I have to like monitor myself and try to make myself do. But I think that what you have to have in mind, I think it's like from the very beginning of the course, you have to know like what the final project is. and you have to look through, and of course, as I said, like the flexibility aspect of it, like many times the final project can be adapted to your own interests. So I think like the earlier that you are able like to narrow into what you want, and sort of like go through the course with that in mind, with that lens, right? And sort of from every reading or from every like class, sort of write down what is your takeaway in relation to that framing, or if not if you don't have like a framing that you're decided on, at least like a reflection of what caught your attention most. What's that thing that is troubling you most, or makes you think about something and question, right? The field. I think like I've been doing that for, as I said, I haven't done it for all the courses, but for the courses that I've been able to do that, it seems to me that it's easier when I get to the end and then I look at everything that I've written down, and it's easier to produce the final paper or the final assignment when I have all those reflections, right, throughout the course.
So Roberto, you will do it like physically on a notebook, or you put it on your laptop when you're doing that kind of journaling?
Yes, exactly. It would be like a type of journaling. It's I do it on the laptop just because I like the find function. So like sometimes I will remember, I was talking about this, or I wrote. What I'm trying to say is, of course, this is one of the assumptions, is that it's important that you not only read, but that you write, right? So it's like read and write, and write. It's important like to read and then write about what you read, right? And so when I use the computer, I can use the find function. Like, I remember writing about this, or what's that word there? If you have like the key words in your mind, you can go back and quickly find what you thought about, or what you had written down. When you use the find function of the computer, I think it's easier than doing it by hand. So that's why I've been using it, and it's been working.
Yeah, so thank you so much for all your tips here and there, because I know that some of our, like a lot of students are struggle about, okay, look at the list of class, which one to choose. And in each class, especially if a doctoral level class that you are taking, of course, the workload and the challenge is very enticing, very attractive, but it also needs a lot of strategic planning, like what you are showing us. So yeah, thank you so much for that sharing. And last thing, I also heard that you are going to be an instructor, and you did some courses in the past as well. So can you also tell us a little bit about your upcoming class next semester?
Oh yes. As I was talking to you earlier, Han, next, as I said, I have been teaching. Ever since I started my doctoral course, I've been a teaching assistant, and I've been teaching media literacy. And I'm excited for next semester in the spring of 2023, because it's going to be like the first time that I'm going to take up a new course, and I'm going to take up ETAP 534, which is Introduction to Games for Learning, Theory and Practice. And I'm going to be co-teaching it with a colleague of ours, right? Sturdy Knight, under the guidance of Dr. Shea. And it's a field that I'm not too familiar with, but I've always been curious about, and I'm really excited, because I think that structuring a course and teaching a course is one of the best ways to learn about something. And so it's going to be great to teach, like to co-teach with Sturdy and learn about this field, and become like progressively become an expert, right, in using gaming in online and technological spaces. So yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and I think that's fit with the technology part of your research interest as well, right? So when you take class, like, do you decide the classes to take on your own, or did you take recommendation from senior students, or your professor advisor help you to select the course?
Yes. So there's sort of like usually the steps that I've been taking is like, first I talk to my peers, reach out to friends and say, oh, what courses have you taken? Did you like this course? Didn't you like this? Or what get peers opinions about the courses which are offered. So that's very common. I think that would be like the first step. And then after I have a sort of an idea of what the courses that interest me, then I will take that to my advisor, and then say, look, I've talked to many people. This is what I'm thinking about, or even if I haven't chosen, because I take like 3 courses per semester, right? So I might not have decided which are the 3. So I might go to my advisor with 5 or 6 courses and say, these are the ones that I'm thinking about. Any ideas, right? What do you think? And it's also very important to talk to your advisor, because your advisor is an insider and has a lot of information about what's going on in the department. And so I think it's very helpful to get guidance from your advisor, because at least for me, it helps a lot in deciding. Like when I have like this handful of courses and I can only choose like 3 or maybe just 2 because or maybe just 1, because sometimes when you have a course that's being offered